Hello, everyone. This is JPO, and today I am joined with
Jay here.
And
and
Christopher.
yes, and we are podcast name in brackets. Yes, and welcome back to our monthly series. We're going to be talking about top five films of the years going by, and today in this month we're going to be talking about the top five films of the year 2001. 2001. Back in the day, people thought 2001 was going to be a space odyssey where we'd be living on the moon and space travel and all that jazz.
Turn
So
into
far,
giant babies.
yeah, giant space babies. So far, we haven't been to the moon since 1970s, so that's interesting. Anyway, so for top five, you know how top fives normally go. We each have a top five. We go over them, go over five, and then we talk about our least favorite of the year and some honorable mentions, and that's about it. So why don't we get started with number five? And also, actually, no. Before we start, I need to point out that sometimes not all of our choices may accurately reflect the quality of the film. So for me, a couple of my choices are just because of nostalgia and for fun. So I have seen better quality films. I don't put them at my top five, as we will discuss. Yes, but we before we actually start with the ranking, Jay, why don't you tell us about the box office of this year?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting year. Um, this is really the seeds that get planted this year for what is going to transpire over the next decade and beyond. The top four movies of the year worldwide at the box office include three movies based on kids' books that would go on to dominate the box office for the next decade. We have at number four, we have Shrek. And at number two, The Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. And at number one, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
What do you
Obviously,
mean
those
by
had many
kids book?
sequels. They're all based on children's books.
Is
Lord of
Shrek
the
based
Rings
off a
was
book?
written. Yes, Shrek is based on a book.
Are you
That's news to
sure?
me.
Yes, you can look it up.
Yeah, look it up, John.
But then, yeah, we also have sequels here. We have The Mummy Returns and Jurassic Park 3. We have a
Oh,
couple remakes. Yep, what was I telling you?
interesting.
It was
It's
nominated for
it's
Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars.
it's
Oh,
So it was
even a
adapted.
comedy. Oh, okay. Interesting.
But yeah, we also have a couple of remakes here. The Tim Burton Planet of the Apes and Ocean's
Uh,
11. In terms of original movies, though, we have Monsters Inc., Pixar's Monsters Inc. taking the third spot. Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor, often considered a big box office bomb. It actually made some money, just not as much as Disney wanted it to make. They wanted it to be as big as Titanic. Didn't get quite that big. And then surprisingly enough, taking up the number eight spot this is the worldwide box office is Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away, which was for a while the highest grossing Japanese movie of all time.
wow.
It has since been overtaken in that statistic, but yeah, really interesting top 10. Um, as you can imagine, this will kind of go on to influence the box office for many years to come. In terms of Oscar, we do some Oscar nominations here as well, just to give you a sense of what's going on. Um, Best Picture nominees are A Beautiful Mind, Gosford Park, In the Bedroom, Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring, and Moulin Rouge. A Beautiful Mind wins Best Picture. That's maybe the least interesting of the five, in my opinion. I think the other four have gone on to get more, or they have aged better. We have the Palme d'Or winner, The Sun's Room, and Razzie Worst Picture winner, Freddie Got Fingered, which I have not seen, but I have heard many things about. And yeah,
yeah,
that's what the cinematic landscape looks like for 2001.
yeah, and it's gonna be interesting to see within the next few years just how much like our top films of this year just shape future films in general. like looking at these films, it's like, yeah, many of these go on to have a bajillion sequels. So good luck to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about things that didn't quite have as success as we may have hoped it to be. So let's go with number 5.
Yeah. So my number 5 is a very a film that I love in large part because I grew up watching it and adore it. But I think it is a genuinely good film. This is Disney's Atlantis: The Lost Empire, directed by Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise of Beauty and the Beast fame. And yeah, this was a transitional time for Disney. The Disney Renaissance, all of their princess movies had kind of started to fade out of relevance, and so, looking for a new audience, they went in the complete opposite direction. And this was the motto for this movie was there are no musical numbers. And that was the attitude with which they approached this. They wanted to make something that was more serious, more action heavy. Um, and yeah, this is the result. It's this big adventure movie. Kind of starts out with this aquatic stuff, and then they go into caves, and then eventually they find Atlantis, and it's this long lost civilization. And yeah, it's so much fun. Again, I grew up with it, so
Yeah.
I have a little bit of bias here, a little bit of nostalgia, but I've rewatched it as an adult, and I always find it so
Hmm.
exciting. And yeah, it's got a lot of steampunk aesthetics, which I love.
Oh yeah.
Got a lot of deep sea stuff, which I love. In fact, this might be ground zero for a lot of that. We have Milo Thatch, who is a hottie. He just fantastic character design, inspired by the Mike Mignola's art style, the creator of Hellboy, with the large
Mm.
hands and sort of more angular, very different from Disney's normal style. And yeah, it's a great time. I love it. The soundtrack is phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, same story with me. I grew up watching it, and I've always loved it. Every time I rewatch the films over the years, I absolutely love the steampunk aesthetic of this film. I think it's one of the more unique things Disney has done, and they've never returned to this. Which I really
Well,
wish this.
Strange World kind of has some of these vibes,
Sure,
which also was not as successful, unfortunately. But
right.
yeah.
Um, what was I saying? I think that this film also has like a really fun menagerie of characters to go along with Milo,
Yes.
and like they're all so fun and memorable. It's like, uh, if you ever need like a blueprint to how to create a like group of people, here, go to this film. Everybody is so unique in what they do. They're so much fun, and I love them all. I really wish this film was longer because I just want to spend more time with them. But yeah, it's a shame that this film was not as successful as they wanted it to be, and I've always thought that the only Disney movie that I would be okay that they did a live action remake would be this one because it would be
They need to get James Cameron to
it
do a
would
live
look
action remake of
if they
this,
did it
because
right, it would look beautiful.
yeah,
Like I
like this
don't
is
think it.
James Cameron's
Yeah,
aesthetic.
yeah.
He would
I don't
knock
know
this
they
out of the
do it
park.
properly, but if they did properly, yeah,
Yeah.
love it.
That would be, yeah.
Yeah, I unfortunately did not grow up with this, and so I
No.
don't have a lot of nostalgia tied to this. Um, so sometimes when looking at a Disney movie, I kind of look at it as a Disney movie, and uh, that's not meant to be derogatory, but it kind of is. It's. I think it's more like I don't necessarily appreciate the style as much. Uh, Basically, maybe just because of not growing up with it. Um, but I will say, I definitely the biggest highlight of the movie for me was the city. I
Mm.
absolutely love the design of that. I think I've always kind of just liked neon-esque looking things anyways, and so kind of seeing just that glowy blue and just it just looks so cool. I just really like it. So yeah, it definitely not like something where I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this. I'm definitely hoping that like on say like a second watch, I like it more. But there were, I think, like probably the movie that might have tickled my fancy the most of like older, not necessarily older Disney, just Disney in general would probably have been what was it? Emperor's New Groove. That probably tickled my fancy the most. Hopefully, maybe Atlantis will go up there one day. Yeah, I don't really know why. It just maybe the mood I was in when I watched it wasn't like, oh my god, we're gonna watch Atlantis. And it was definitely before when I was starting to try to appreciate cinema more. But I absolutely love the city.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess we're moving on to I think your number 5, Christopher.
Yeah. Um. Again, another movie I kind of watched before, like diving a little more into movies. But when I watched this 2 3 years ago, A Knight's Tale, with Heath Ledger. Um, I just remember it being fun. When I watched it with people, we had a little bit of fun. We laughed a little bit. So it's kind of I just remember having a fun time with this. I think like combining like uh, more medieval time with the American rom com formula was kind of fun to see. So yeah, I just remember this movie being fun time. Not big fireworks attached to this, but I'm just like, yeah, I remember it being fun.
John, did we watch this in a class in middle school or high school?
I don't know if we did.
It might have been before you arrived because I
That's
remember watching it in school.
Yeah. I think I would have remembered. I typically remember the films I watch in school, so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't recall ever watching this one. So that was probably the year before I came. So
yeah. It was a censored version of it, which was interesting when I got home and then was like, oh, I need to watch this again. And was like, oh, this is more PG-13 I remember it being when I watched it at school earlier today. Um, but yeah,
what class
it's
did you
fun.
watch it for? Do you remember?
I have no idea what it would have
Mm.
been for. It might have been, maybe it was, I did a medieval studies class, so maybe it
Interesting.
was that.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, it's fun. I haven't seen it in many years, so I can't speak too much of what it is. I was going to rewatch it for this, but then I saw that it's like 2 hours and 14 minutes or something, which seems a little excessive. But yeah, I remember it being a really fun time with some great characters, a lot of phenomenal actors. We have Heath Ledger, as you mentioned. We also have Alan Tudyk and Rufus Sewell, and Paul Bettany as Geoffrey Chaucer. Yeah, just a fun time.
Yeah. I haven't seen this film, so I cannot comment on it. So yeah. So I guess we should move on to my number 5. Uh, yes, as I mentioned earlier, not all my choices are based on their quality, but more so how they reflect with me. For some reason, for number 5, I decided to go with the film Spy Kids. Um, this is a film made by uh, can you
Robert
remind me?
Rodriguez.
Yeah, Robert Rodriguez. Yes, that's him. It is not the best quality film out there by any standards, but I, I watched this film recently a couple years ago, and I was thinking, it's like, man, if I were a child, this would be my favorite movie. And it was when I saw this as a kid, because this film is like, it is the kids, it's the film that kids want to be. It's like, kids, they want to be spies. There's so much imagination in this film, and like the rest of the Spy Kids films with varying degrees of quality. But the imagination is there. It is wild. It is fun. It is stuff that kids will watch this film and be like, "Bit man, I wish I was that." I remember like watching these films and seeing all the gadgets they got. Was like, man, I want those gadgets. Um, so yeah, I mean the story is fine. Like the characters are alright. The overall thing is just kind of there, but it's a really fun time. Like it's a solid like 90 minutes of just kid
It's such a
stuff.
weird movie in like that
Yeah,
Robert Rodriguez way of like there's just so much going on. And I haven't
yeah,
seen this since I was a kid, but I remember really enjoying it and also being really weirded out by certain elements of it. Um,
true.
Alan
Yeah,
Cumming plays the villain who's like the host of this kids TV show. And I mean, Alan Cumming is always great. And I want to rewatch this just for him because I know he's like delivering. Um, but yeah, you also have like a whole bunch of big name actors in here: Antonio Banderas and Carla Gugino. Is this one with Danny Trejo in it, or is
yeah.
that a
He's in
later
like
one?
no, he's in all three films. Yeah.
Okay, well now there's five, but
Well, the first original trilogy, he's in
yes,
here
yes,
technically playing his machete character from these other
yes,
series
which
of
I love.
films.
I
Canonically, I
love that
think.
this director, who's like known for his violent action movies, decided to make a kids movie that has so many of the same sensibilities, but dialed way up in terms of insanity. Yeah, I want to rewatch this whole franchise at some point. I have a lot of fondness for Robert Rodriguez and his sort of his approach to filmmaking. Um,
Yeah. Like, he's not afraid to just have fun, just be childish
yeah,
and do the craziest stuff. Like, yes, half the time it may not look good, but he's fine with that. Like,
this one looks better than some of his later movies do.
I mean, yeah, once they got into like the digital age of like blue screen and green screen for everything, yeah, yeah. But no, this is a fun time, I'd say.
Have you seen this one, Christopher?
I have not. So that'd be very interesting watching this as an adult, and
Watch it
I
with
have
your
no.
kids; they'll love it. Maybe
I
I don't
I
know.
I love hearing what you guys are saying about like watching this as kids. Like that makes me smile. But me casually watching it today, that's a weird thought. I guess it's
It
funny
is,
hearing people talk about these movies, though.
yeah. It's a weird one. I feel like when I revisit it, I'm gonna just be like, why did my parents let me watch this?
I mean, it's
Not in
probably
terms
not
of
going to
like
be
any.
that crazy, but there are certainly other films where I'm like, wait, why did I watch this as a kid? I shouldn't have been allowed in the room. I've been
This is
traumatized
not
by this film.
not anything like inappropriate. Just like the
No.
designs of like the kids show characters and like their disfigured faces that are all like monstrous, and I mean it looks so cool, but
Yeah.
also I don't know what was going on. There are characters who are entirely made up of thumbs.
Oh my gosh,
Yes. Thumbs.
they're called Thum Thumbs.
Yep.
That, if you haven't seen the movie, that's all you need to know
That's
about
so
what the
funny.
sensibilities of this movie are.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh.
All right. I guess let's move on.
Well, yeah, speaking of Mexican directors, my number four is Guillermo del Toro's Devil's Backbone. Um, yeah, this is an interesting one. I hadn't seen this before starting doing prep work for this podcast, so I had heard quite a bit about it. Um, this is sort of a proto version of Pan's Labyrinth. It also takes place during the Spanish Civil War, follows a kid, this time a young boy who has been orphaned, and he ends up at this boarding school that is run by revolutionaries who are sort of trying to stay away from the fascist people who are taking over the country. Um, and it just gets involved in all of this sort of political and wartime stuff, much like Pan's Labyrinth. But then we also have this story of this boy who, in this one, it isn't a fantasy world, but instead a ghost story. There's this ghost that keeps showing up, and he keeps seeing this ghost, and is trying to figure out what's going on there. And in the center of the courtyard for this dorm is this bomb that has landed and has not exploded. Sort of serves as this metaphor for the simmering tensions in this school. And yeah, Guillermo del Toro just has such a great grasp of storytelling and of like poetic irony, where you always know by the end of the movie he's going to draw everything together in a way that is emotionally satisfying, not happy necessarily, but everything's going to, there's a sense of completeness by the end. That's just, it's so beautiful. It's very sad, but there's a catharsis when it's over and you feel like you've joined these characters on this journey. um yeah, I call it a proto Pan's Labyrinth because it has so many similar ideas and similar themes, but this is a fully formed film. Like, this stands on its own, but also you can see him revisiting it with Pan's Labyrinth. Yeah, it's one of my favorites of his, but I love all of his films, so.
I bet John's seen it.
Hundreds of times for sure. Yeah, yeah. Seen it so many times that I've literally no words to talk about, you know.
Oh my gosh. I was actually considering watching this today, but a different movie won out for me.
Yeah, this is a bit on the heavier side, but if you enjoy Guillermo del Toro's work, this is so quintessential to what works about everything he makes.
Yeah. I
Also, like,
honestly,
incredible visual effects.
Mhm.
honestly, the only thing I've seen from him is the Pinocchio thing. So definitely somebody I should dive into it more today. I thought it was fascinating, like seeing the fact that it's an all Spanish language movie, right?
Yes, yeah, it
Yeah,
takes place in Spain.
I had not seen a full Spanish movie, so I was kind of looking forward to that aspect. All right, I guess my turn.
Yes.
Yeah. If John did a preface, I will do a preface as well.
Okay.
I've not seen many movies. That's my preface. Anyways, I think on my letterbox list I've only have 10 for the year. So, um, but that does not dismiss what I'm about to say. But it definitely did sound like it. I apologize.
Sure. Yeah.
My my fourth pick is Monsters Inc. Um, so yeah, I had only watched this. I think it was earlier this year. Earlier this year, it's fun. I think what kind of did sell it for me was how the ending. The ending sold me on the emotion. Um, if I didn't cry, I at least teared up. Yeah, so I think I just enjoyed the fact that like it brought me to that at the end, but it's still enjoyable throughout regardless. Um, yeah, um, yeah. I guess sometimes I think about it and I'm like, feel like there'd be other movies I'd like a little more. So I think that's kind of why I prefaced it. Um, I feel like maybe if I watched more, it wouldn't be in top five, but like there are definitely moments of it I do like about it.
This whole era of Pixar is just
Yeah.
really well constructed films from an emotional standpoint in a way that I think has really fallen off. They occasionally still hit it, but they take more shortcuts to get you to cry. Whereas with Monsters Inc., they genuinely build these characters and these relationships in a way that makes you care for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think this is a very worthy film to be on a top 5 list of the year. Yeah, I think it is kind of funny that you preface this when this is probably one of the most beloved films of 2001. If
I
you
guess that's
had put
fair.
like just a random
Spy
like
Kids.
Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes here, then maybe, or Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor. But yeah, no,
Mhm.
I definitely understand how like yeah, there is also this is a very specific kind of movie, and if that doesn't speak to you as much, then there's still something there. There is an innate storytelling quality to it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I can see why this wouldn't be your favorite on of the year.
Yeah, I think like I didn't grow up on this movie, so first off, I don't have a nostalgic tie to it. Um, but also yeah, like what you said, like they go through a great process of bringing you to that emotional end. But I also don't remember like, oh my gosh, I love this movie, like I did with The Incredibles. I was shocked how much I loved The Incredibles, and so I don't remember which one I watched first. Um, so if I watched Monster Inc. afterwards, maybe there was a little bit of wanting that, like, oh my gosh, I love that I got from The Incredibles that I didn't get as much from this. It also could be a little bit of like that nostalgic hype that I get from people. Like, oh my god, I love Monster Inc. And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, if everyone loves it, I should love it too. And so maybe I feel a little disappointed in myself in not liking this as much. Um, but yeah, it's a weird place, kind of like because like seeing things that are popular or very much loved, and you not loving it as much, kind of thing. But still being
yeah,
able to appreciate elements from it, which I most definitely do for this movie.
yeah. I've been rewatching or not rewatching, watching Twin Peaks for the first time, and I'm having that experience of like everyone else loves this, and I don't really love it. So I definitely understand where you're coming from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, we'll probably have similar feelings with the next film we're going to be talking about. But moving on to my number 4, we have best film of the year, Shrek. Shrek. Definitely huge nostalgia. Shrek is a hard one to really take seriously because the entire film is just a meme, and when the entire thing becomes a meme, it's hard to really remember like, oh, why did I really like this film? I like it now because of the memes and such, but yeah, yeah, no, Shrek. It was, what can I say? It was fun. I enjoyed the comedy. Watching this stuff as an adult, it's like, whoa, DreamWorks, what are you doing? Why are you putting on with these jokes in these quote unquote kids films? No, Shrek.
Do you know the reason why? Because I can once you're done, I'll tell you the reason why.
I mean,
The
I know
behind the
some of
scenes reason.
the behind the scenes where the Shrek
Yeah,
was like a
yeah.
punishment for people who weren't doing good on the other films. So,
Oh,
no.
there's more. We'll get
Oh,
into it
there's
in a
more.
second.
There's more. Yeah. No, Shrek, I enjoy the energy. I think it has just the right amount of emotion to me for me to take it seriously and enjoy it. But I also just really like the comedy and the subversion, the throwing it to the face of Disney of how they just like, fairy tale creatures, forget that. I wipe my butt with your fairy tales, and we're gonna do our own little thing that mocks your entire culture.
Yeah,
And
I mean
I
this
didn't
essentially killed the Disney princess thing
Renaissance, yeah,
for
yeah.
10
Of course,
years.
I didn't like get that at all while watching the kid. I was like, the green guy, he's fun. Uh, Eddie Murphy as the donkey, he's funny. Uh, there's some catchy music that's just stuck in my head. Smash Mouth, oh my
Oh.
goodness, I love Smash Mouth because of this
Oh
film.
no.
You have the yeah, no, you have a whole thing about the needle drops of this film that we've had the discussion about needle drops in recent films. uh I think you had maybe pointed out that this is probably like the beginnings of the needle drops in kids films.
I mean, I feel like this is, if not ground zero, this is what popularized it.
Yeah.
I have worked a retail job, so I have, the next time I hear Smash Mouth All Star by Smash Mouth, I am throwing myself in the nearest body of water. I cannot stand that song.
I'm sorry. I love the soundtrack to this film. I think the needle drops in this one is great. They work better than what feature films do, at least. Sure. Yeah.
Man.
There you go. Animation is it is Shrek. I'll, that's what I'll say. It is not your top quality Pixar animation, but it is enough to get you by and maybe enjoy it.
Yeah, well, unlike me, I saw the first 10-ish minutes of this. I was at somebody's place and they put on this movie. And obviously, when you casually put on this movie, most everyone there has seen it before. So they're
Right.
either watching it or watching it casually or, having their degree of fun with it. And me, I would be one to want to try to take a more serious watch with it than in a more casual environment. Despite that, the real reason I left was the animation. It weirded me out. And this was only a couple years ago, so it wasn't like me as a kid. This was very recent, like 2 years ago. I was like, I can't do this. I don't like this. It's too weird for me. Um, yeah, I will say though, Eddie Murphy as the donkey. Uh, that probably would sit me back down. I like Eddie Murphy a lot, so maybe one day I'll give this another shot. But it's an eyesore. It's
I
the
mean,
biggest eyesore I've ever seen.
you're visiting soon, so maybe I'll force you down and watch Shrek.
I was surprised how early All Star played, though. I didn't expect it to be that early in the movie.
I was glad they got it out of the way.
That's why it became such a big meme because it's like the first 20 seconds of the film.
Oh,
All right. Anything else you want to say, Jay?
yeah. I I did not grow up in a DreamWorks household. We were very much on the Disney side of things, and by the time I was old enough to be aware of Shrek as a concept through like people at school, it had gotten to the point of just being something that did not interest me in the slightest. As like the sequels were coming out, it just felt so irreverent in a way that I wouldn't have enjoyed. And I just kind of internalized that as like, oh, this is what Shrek is. Um and then I saw memes and stuff, I saw clips, but I finally sat down to watch this in preparation for this podcast. And I was surprised by how well it works. It's very irreverent, but I think it walks a very fine line where it's also very sincere. And it's such a fine line that I think everything that tries to replicate it can't quite do it, including probably the sequels, which I haven't seen the sequels yet. I will probably be watching them in preparation for when we do those podcasts. But yeah, it's like it works in a weird way that I wasn't expecting. I didn't expect to like this. I watched this with my dad, who was also not expecting to like it. And afterwards, we were both like, "Oh, that was actually that worked in a way I wasn't expecting." Yeah, just to go to the behind the scenes stuff I was referencing before, this was produced by Jeffrey Katzenberg, one of the co-founders of DreamWorks. And one of the reasons he co-founded DreamWorks is because he was head of Disney Animation for many years, and there was a whole mess, and I don't know if he was fired or if he left, but there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. A lot of drama went down. Not a good spot for him. So this was kind of his middle finger to Disney as after he had left. He was like, I'm going to make something that is the anti-Disney, that goes against everything that Disney said and stood for, and all of the Disney Renaissance that I helped bring to fruition. Um, so knowing that going in, I was like, oh, I was expecting something made out of spite, but there's actually a lot of love hidden inside of it. And as for the animation, I have a certain nostalgia for this like early 2000s animation. Watching growing up with the Barbie movies, or I mean anything from around that time. The like slightly empty environments, very flat surfaces, all of that kind of stuff has a certain charm for me. Um, so yeah, this was a surprise for me watching this and being like, oh, I actually enjoyed that more than I ever thought I would, except for the needle drops, which I think are actively harm the movie. They are all bad. They do not work for the scenes they are in. There are too many of them.
Well, let's agree to disagree.
I think
So,
I think
John,
it is. Yeah. Oh yeah.
quick question, John. So,
Yeah.
do you believe Shrek 2 to be better than the first one, like most everyone else that seemed to exist on the planet Earth?
Uh, yes and no. It is a bit of a mixed bag. I think I enjoy the first one the most. It's the one I rewatched the most because I saw the second one in theaters when it came out. So there's that. Um, Plus, like sequels typically have a bigger scale and a very noticeable bigger budget, and so that's very noticeable as well. I like the sequel, but I have more fondness towards this first one. And I think maybe I'll talk about the sequel when we get to that year. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm assuming it'll come up.
Somewhere. All right.
Yep.
Moving on.
Yeah, on to my number 3. I have this was a real surprise for me watching stuff in preparation for this. And that is Jean-Pierre Junot's Amélie. This is just such a fascinating film. I'm gonna wait a second until John gets back. I might actually pause the.
I left because I hadn't seen this, or I don't know if I even seen the second one, so I gave you time.
There's a second one?
Yours,
Oh
Christopher.
yeah,
My second one?
No, let's continue. Forget it.
yeah.
What?
I'll write the time code for you, so that you can edit stuff out. But yeah, this is a film by Jean-Pierre Junot, the French director, who prior to this, just to set up, he had made his first film was a post-apocalyptic comedy, dark comedy. He followed that up with The City of Lost Children, which is like dark sci-fi fantasy, very very grim. And then he made Alien Resurrection, which John, you've seen that one.
I have seen that one, yes.
So this director follows up these 3 very dark films with a very sweet comedy about this young girl in France who has this sort of epiphany and decides that she is going to be a force for good in people's lives. She comes up with these elaborate schemes to improve the lives of the people around her. Like, she discovers this little box of little treasures that someone had hidden away in a wall somewhere. And she decides to return it to the person. But she's not just going to return it. She goes through this whole thing. She like sets up something with a payphone so that he like finds the box and then like follows him around to see his reaction. And the whole movie is just structured around these like little schemes that she comes up with to like slightly improve the lives of the people around her. Her father, who has always wanted to travel but never had the like motivation to actually do it, she steals his garden gnome and starts sending him pictures of the garden gnome in various places around the world. And it's just like all of these little things that are just like tiny things that are making these people's lives better. And then at a certain point of the movie, she starts to realize that, you know, she's helping all of these other people, but maybe she should also do something for herself. And she starts looking for some romance, and there's a whole elaborate scheme with that. And it's just so sweet, but it's also like what I'm describing probably sounds a little bit like saccharine, like, oh, it's so sweet, it just like leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. But there's just enough like weirdness and just a pinch of darkness. It's like a little bit of salt in the cookie batter that makes it, instead of being blandly sweet, it like adds this fuller flavor to it. um I would compare this. This is very much, you watch this and you go, oh, this is where Wes Anderson got it from. Like, so much of his style going forward, you can tell he watched this and was very much inspired by it.
Hmm.
This is less melancholy than most of Wes Anderson's stuff, though, but it is just, it's so nice and so sweet and a great way to just spend 2 hours and feel good about life and inspired to be a better person. Yeah, it's so good. It's one of those movies that I went in unsure because it has such a big reputation as like one of those movies that like people watch and then base their entire personality around. But then you watch it and you're like, oh yeah, no, I get why that is a thing people do, because this is such a delightful little movie with such a wonderful protagonist.
I haven't seen it.
You would like this one, John.
Probably.
Yeah, I have yet to see it either, but hopefully one day.
Yeah,
All right.
this is one, if you haven't seen it, it is worth seeking out.
All right. Moving on to
Oh.
yours. Yeah.
Yeah, me. Legally Blonde. I watched this a couple months ago. One movie that kind of been like on my like mental watch list for a while was like Clueless, and I watched it. I enjoyed it for what it was. For some reason, Legally Blonde had never been like that high on my like mental list, but the time was right, and I sat down to watch it, and I enjoyed Legally Blonde way more than Clueless, slash way more than I expected to. Um, of course, nothing against Clueless, but just Legally Blonde, I just had a lot more fun with. So, um, again, when watching things alone, I rarely laugh out loud. I laughed out loud at least half a dozen times watching Legally Blonde, and it just worked for me. Sometimes when you get a situation of like an outsider in a very different scenario or situation, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, depending on the viewer's personal taste and preference. For me, it worked really well, and I just had a fun time watching it.
Yeah, this is one that I watched in preparation for this podcast, actually. And again, like you were saying, I was very surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Um, Reese Witherspoon is hilarious. Her whole vibe here, and obviously the idea here is that she's sort of the typical, stereotypical blonde girl who wears all of these fashion and cares about fashion and boys and her little dog that she brings everywhere. And then she decides to go to law school. There's a complicated thing. Her fiance or boyfriend breaks up with her, and she's going to prove herself to him by going to law school. It actually becomes a competent lawyer. Um, yeah, it's one of those, as you were saying, someone comes into this new system and then finds their place in it, but she doesn't lose herself to the system either. And it's the things that she cares about that make her special and that allow her to succeed. um yeah, it's just, it feels very much like there's a long list of movies that inspired Greta Gerwig's Barbie. This one definitely feels like it's in the mix there in terms of how it's dealing with societal topics and femininity, and trying to show that femininity is not inherent, or like femininity is not a negative trait. and that someone can be very feminine and also be a really good lawyer, wearing the best pink outfits ever. I could definitely see the inspiration for the character of Sharpay in High School Musical.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Jennifer Coolidge is in this as well. Anytime she shows up in something, especially since I've been watching through for this podcast a lot of early 2000s comedies, anytime she shows up, it's just a blast.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever seen this film. If I did, I was young. It wasn't by choice. It was just something that my mother and sister would put on. I know that I've seen parodies of just like the blonde girl with the dog in the bag. I've seen parodies of that all over the place, but I don't know if I've ever seen this one. I know I've seen Miss Congeniality, so maybe
Which
I've
this is kind of the opposite, because Miss Congeniality is the secret agent, the butch
yeah,
secret agent has to become a beauty queen.
yeah. So
But yeah, this
you
is
know,
similar vibe.
yeah.
This one's
I
better
get
than Miss
I get this
Congeniality,
one
though.
like mixed up with like Clueless and Mean Girls. They're all the
Yeah.
same to me if I just don't pay attention to what it is. But yeah, I cannot confirm or deny whether or not I've seen this film. I can just say that I don't know anything really about the film outside of what you just said. So there you go.
John, no, Jake. Could I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Rank Mean Girls, Legally Blonde, and Clueless.
Mean Girls, Legally Blonde, Clueless.
I
Top to
agree.
bottom. Yeah.
I agree. Mean Girls is just so good. It,
Yes.
I know, like one could look at it and be like, "Oh, the formula," but it feels like the formula when I watched it. Like, and it's one of those things where it's like it just does it well. It's like sometimes I think about like stories. It's like, yeah, maybe in theory we're running out of stories, so all you need to do is to tell that story well, and you win that way.
Yeah.
Like
And I think
you could
Legally
have,
Blonde fits that as well.
yeah,
It is
I
it is a story that we have seen before, but it is constructed so solidly that you can't help but get invested.
yeah. And somewhat on the flip side, sometimes you could have a very creative story, but the execution could be bad, and that will only dilute what it attempted to be. But yeah, so like Mean Girls and Legally Blonde are two movies where I'm like, yeah, you did it so well, and I really enjoyed that. Can't wait to watch them again one day in the future, kind of thing. Big smiles on my
Yeah.
face, you know.
Sure, yeah. I'll stick to
Yeah,
Barbie
John.
Diaries.
I'm
All
surprised
right.
Barbie hasn't made their Legally Blonde as an animated movie. It feels like something that they would do.
I mean, kind of have, but not really. Three
Yeah.
Musketeers.
Yeah, that's a similar plot.
Sure. Moving on to my number 3, we are returning to the film Monsters Incorporated. The film where Bibble becomes a giant man, voiced by John Goodman.
I had never noticed that. Oh
Yep.
no.
Good luck rewatching that film now with Bibble in mind. Yeah. Sorry, I ruined it for you. I was just looking at the photos and was like, that's Bibble. That's his exact scheme. Anyway, I love the imagination of this film. Back when Pixar was imaginative and not just
Before they
what
ran out of napkin ideas,
yeah,
yeah.
before they ran out of napkin and decided to go with culture and lore. And that's fine too. We like those cultures, but I don't know. I love the days where they could just pick different things. It's like, we'll do a movie about fish, ants, monsters. So yeah, this one. It's fun. I like the variety of character designs of them being like terrified of this small human child and not understanding human customs. The concept of like the doors, the portals to like the different rooms and such, that's so cool and unique. I really wish they had the proper sequel that they originally wanted to do. Maybe it would have sucked, but it would have been something to explore. Um, I haven't watched this film in years. I had seen it enough times as a kid, most Pixar films really, to like not really ever watch it again. But I liked it. There were things that you'd often quote, like the Slug Lady, the older Slug Lady, secret agent, whoever she was. Um, yeah, I think this was also, if not the first start, but like the start of like Pixar's and kind of Disney's twist villains, kind of.
Okay, that might be the case.
Yeah, with the Spider-Man character, the Crab
Yeah,
Man, I guess.
Waterloo, Waternoose.
Harvey Weinstein.
Oh boy, that makes or John. I guess no. Lasseter's the bear from Toy Story 3.
Okay.
Anyway,
Well, anyway,
now problematic Hollywood studio executives
sorry about that.
who worked for Disney at the same time. Oh
Yeah.
boy.
Okay. I really threw a grenade in that one.
Or was it a human sock?
Oh. Right. Any final thoughts on this one? I know we've talked about it before.
I like it. Yeah, I haven't
You
seen it in
mentioned the
many years,
imagination,
but
the imagination side. Yeah, that's a good
yeah,
one.
yeah. This is
Imagination.
again Pixar. When they were starting out, they went to a restaurant. I don't know if everyone's aware of this story, but it's the famous story. The creative heads of Pixar went out to a restaurant and they had these like great ideas and they drew them all out on this napkin of all of the movies that they wanted to make. Um, and it was Finding Dory, it was Monsters Inc. I believe Wally was in there. I think it's everything through Wally except for maybe Ratatouille. And yeah, once they run out of napkin ideas, they kind of start floundering a little bit creatively. But this is still solidly in the napkin ideas where they're thinking deeply about how to structure narrative. Not that the new Pixar stuff is bad, but yeah, there's a difference in quality in a lot of the stuff.
All right.
So yeah, on
Moving
to my
on.
number two. I don't know what to talk about this one because it's my number two, but it is feasibly in my top 10 of all time. Um, this is Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away. It's just it took me a while to come around to this one. I think I saw it 3 or 4 times before it finally actually hit me and I like understood what it is about and how it is approaching things. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's deep. It has so much thematic resonance. The characters are phenomenal. It's exciting, it's enthralling, it's emotional. I cry every time I watch it. I sometimes cry when I listen to the soundtrack just because the soundtrack is so gorgeous. Um yeah, every time I rewatch it, I love it a little bit more. And I went from years ago watching it the first time not really understanding it to now I rewatch it and go, "Oh yeah, this is one of my all-time favorites." The only reason this isn't higher on my list is because, spoiler alert, my number one movie
Yeah.
on this list is my
Oh
favorite
yeah.
movie of all time. So this being number two is like this beats most movies any other year. It just happens that there are two films from this year that I adore. Um, yeah,
Have you seen this movie, John?
I have. I've seen it a couple times. Um, I'm I'm not at the point yet where I love this film or really like it. I appreciate it. I think the animation is top tier, best stuff you can ever get from hand drawn animation. It is beautiful. It is gorgeous. It is imaginative, but the story doesn't resonate with me, and this could be a cultural thing, or maybe I just need to watch it 100 times for me to finally get it. Um, I have I've found when I recently went through a bunch of Ghibli films, and I found that um, for many Miyazaki films, the story is not the important thing that he focused on. He focuses on the emotion of the characters and just getting lost in the world that he creates, and that's fun. It's fun to see characters getting lost, but I'm there for the story. I want characters to be like, hey, these are the stakes. Remember the stakes. Why are you doing this thing in this all? What are you doing in this bathhouse? Stop bathing. Remember the stakes. Find the solution. A lot of times I feel like characters in his films forget things, and I understand like the audience will get lost in the world, and yeah, it's great. It is imaginative. It's wonderful, but I don't love how he goes into that. That's just me. That's what I've noticed. So I don't love the story of this film. I've often found that people have said that this is like the best Ghibli film, and I always find it a little underwhelming. It's like I love other Ghibli films more than this one, but yeah, no, but that's just me,
Jerry,
Christopher.
what's your thoughts about like the story thing? Because I've not
It's
necessarily seen a lot for me to have much an opinion, but I also see what he's saying at the same time.
it
Just
is
curious
very
your
much
thoughts.
true of Miyazaki, and it depends on the film. Something like Nausicaa or Princess Mononoke are a little bit more plotty, whereas yeah, the Spirited Away, Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, these are all, the story takes a back seat to the world and the characters and the emotions. And for me, like I am very focused on character when I watch something. So it works for me, but again, with Spirited Away, I it took me a while to understand the narrative structure. Part of it is cultural. I have less experience with Japanese media versus American media, so the story structure didn't immediately grab me. But also, it is something specific with how Miyazaki approaches story in this one and in all of his work. Yeah, there is a very deep story here,
Mm-hmm.
but it is very metaphorical, and the characters take precedent over the story and the emotions take precedent over the actual plot progression, um, in a way that I find very beautiful. But I do understand that like it's a bit of a jarring thing. Again, first time I watched this didn't work for me. Second time I watched it didn't quite work for me. I took a class on Miyazaki's films in college, and it worked a little bit better for me with some cultural context, but it still didn't hit me. It wasn't until like my fourth rewatch that it finally just washed over me, and I got on like an emotional level what it was communicating. And yeah, I don't think that is an experience you can teach someone how to have. You just kind of have to have it, or maybe you don't have it, and there, yeah, I can understand both sides of this, but I mean, this is just one of the best films ever made. So
Yeah. So I am with you on the first watch. I've only seen it once, and I don't really get it. There are other Miyazaki movies that I've seen that I've enjoyed more. Um, so yeah, this one just hasn't
out of
hit me yet.
curiosity, what ones do you prefer?
Okay, so I will say this would probably be at my bottom.
Okay.
Um, I think I've seen four. So then at number three would probably be Howl's Moving Castle, which was my first Miyazaki.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad Spirited Away wasn't my first. I'd always thought about that movie because that just seemed to be the most popular. and I wonder like if I would have been a little too taken aback by the weirdness if it was my first. So I think the House Moving Castle was a good one to watch before Spirited Away.
Yeah.
Um, Number two, I would probably put Boy and the Heron. I don't understand it, but I really enjoyed it. So, yeah. And then Kiki's Delivery Service would be
Okay.
my number one. That one, I think I was more able to take that as a character story than a narrative per se.
Yeah.
And I think that was also the most recent one I saw. Yeah, it just really worked for me.
Yeah.
So I just really enjoyed that one. I don't necessarily know. Well, I definitely feel like it started to click a little more for me for Miyazaki's style, but I also don't necessarily know if that has unlocked it for me because it still could be back to an individual movie by movie basis. But that one was the one that worked the best for me.
Yeah, and Kiki doesn't have the same sort of urgency to
That's true.
the stakes, so it's a little bit easier to like fall into the rhythms of it. And that's
Yeah.
probably my favorite of Miyazaki's as well. So,
Yeah.
I
Me
for
too.
me, like all Miyazaki movies are 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, and most of them are 10 out of 10. So my rankings are a little bit, um, they don't like illuminate much, and they shift around all the time because they're like, yeah, they're my favorite, some of my favorites of all time. But
Mhm.
yeah, I do think this is one I would encourage anyone who has only seen it once to maybe do a little bit, maybe watch a video essay about it or something, but give it a second shot or a third shot because it is, for what it is doing, it is doing it phenomenally well, better than maybe any other movie has ever done. So yeah.
I think I will say for me, I feel like I do want to watch more Miyazaki before going back to Spirited Away, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely not against rewatching it one day.
Yeah, that is, and he has such a like breadth of career. It's worth re-experiencing, I think, just to see if it clicks.
Mhm.
Well, let's move on to your number two, Christopher.
Uh, sorry, you can edit this out if you want, but so in the slides, and it's
Yes.
okay. I'm just saying this, okay? This is not the Korean poster.
Okay.
No, it's totally okay, but I never, I just like scrolled and I just saw it like it's quite a poster right there. Anyways, all right. My number two is well. First off, I'll also say just like Jacob, I have a number one, number two issue as well. My number one is one of my favorite movies of all time. Number two is a incredibly great movie, and it's almost weird to not see it number one. um, But my number two movie is a Korean movie called My Sassy Girl, and um, kind of similar to what I will be saying with like my number one. Like it tells its story well with like the way it chooses to do things. It definitely, I will say, probably plays with your emotions maybe more than necessary. um, but yeah, it and I found it absolutely hilarious watching it. So it was fun to watch a romance movie with comedy that was making me laugh like at least once every 5 minutes, kind of thing. Um, just well told story. I don't really know much to say about it, um, except that if you're able to watch it, watch it. But I honestly don't know what its accessibility looks like in America. I imported a Blu-ray from South Korea, and because I've definitely known it's definitely one of the more popular um, films or more well regarded. And so I'd always kind of like seen its existence and like, I gotta check it out one day. And so I bought it and watched it and really enjoyed it. And I hope people are able to watch and enjoy it one day yourself too.
Yeah, I was seeing. I don't know. I haven't heard of this film before. I was doing research on it for this podcast. But is there a sequel or something, or like a spin-off?
Apparently, there is a sequel, and looking at the letterbox things, it definitely looks like a cash grab crap
Okay.
thing, and they basically kind of trash the ending of the movie in favor
Oh,
to do it all over again. Um, with yeah, it it definitely kind of just seemed like a cash grab to just do it again. I'd assume like how there's a Mean Girls 2.
yep. Legally
That's
Blonde 2 as well. Add 3.
mm, but 2, is that like a proper sequel of sorts or not?
I don't know. I haven't seen it, so
Okay, but definitely Mean Girls 2, like absolutely new set of characters. I've
yeah.
not seen it, but from what I've seen of it, like you've replaced most, or if not all, the cast, and it seems like you're just putting them in the same situations than necessarily progressing the story. And so that's what I've seen of the second version of My Sassy Girl. The little bit of research I did, like, okay, that doesn't really seem like it's worth watching. I'll just rewatch the first one.
Yeah. I was just curious because I don't know a ton about Korean film and how common it is for like a rom com to get a sequel like that.
Yeah, I think I don't know how often movies get rom coms. I said that very weird. I feel like usually the rom com thing happens more with the shows, and sometimes sequels do happen with shows, but I also feel like those can be very rare, kind of rare. I don't feel like I see them as often. But also, like, I feel like even in a general sense, I don't really feel like rom coms get sequels that often in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very
So,
uncommon, at least in the US. So seeing that kind of surprised me. It was like, oh, this must have been a very big hit for that
yeah,
to
so
have happened.
I guess it was big enough to be like, oh my god, we'll do a knockoff sequel 10 years later to
Yeah.
kind of capitalize on it. I hope it bombed. Yeah, but again, I think one enjoyable aspect is the way the story is told. Um, yeah,
Is it through like
everything kind of like
flashbacks or because yeah, I guess I should say the trailer that I watched had sort of more of a flashback structure.
uh um I will this will sound weird to say. I will choose not to give it away, which
Okay.
is almost kind of giving it away, but not really. But it's in a way where like, and I know it's practically giving it away, but not really. But like everything kind of like just clicks at the end, and
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
dang, like that last scene, like all those little details scattered throughout finally come together, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite feelings watching a film, and that's I mean the Devil's Backbone, which I had higher or lower down on my list, has stuff like that as well. So yeah, that makes me more interested in checking it out if it has that kind of narrative cohesion to it.
hmm John, what are your opinion of rom coms? Are they your favorite kind of movie to consume? Does this movie scream "Watch me, watch me"?
Generally, no. I don't think I actually like rom coms.
Oh,
Romance is not my thing. Comedies hit or miss depending on what era we're in. But rom coms, um, no. I have not seen this film as well, so I have no opinion to give. Other
it has
than
never been more over.
yeah, yeah. Moving on to my number two, we are gifted kind of with the beginnings of a whole new franchise that would span the next decade, and that film is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or if you're from the UK, the Philosopher's Stone. Not sure why we had two different titles for the same film, but there you go.
Who wants to watch a movie about philosophers?
That was the version I watched first as a kid. So
Okay,
when I saw the
yeah,
American version for the first,
that was the thinking when they changed the title. I guess it was
Wait,
probably for the book that they changed the title, but yeah.
how different are the versions?
Oh, they're the
the,
same movie. It's just the
it's
title.
yeah, it's also like there's just this one line in the film where they have to dub over this change sorcerers to philosophers. So
Okay.
yeah, it's the exact same thing. It's just the different word that's being said. Um, yeah, the first Harry Potter film, and one of my favorites of the whole series of films. It is this and the next one are the ones that really capture the sense of wonder and excitement they get from the wizarding world. Because after this point, we get more towards like the teenage angst and the dark, evil stuff that's going on in the background. And so we lose a lot of that sense of wonder. We lose a lot of the color grading as we go on in these films. So, first one, and this is directed by Christopher Columbus, who's like known for doing kids films like Home Alone and such. And so it really captured the sense of wonder. So as a kid, no wonder many people are like in love with Harry Potter, because like the first couple films just really get you want to be part in that world, because like, it's so exciting, it's magical, oh my goodness, what's this and that, it looks so much fun. And yeah, it's a simple little tale, enjoyable here and there. Does it has issues? Probably. I don't really I don't really care to go into the deep aspects of the issues, but it's enjoyable. It is a solid start to these films, I'd say, and it has the charm, it has the wonder, it has the colors. There you go. It does not in fact have the great CGI. So that's a thing, but whatever.
Have you seen this one, Christopher?
I have not. I
Okay.
almost saw it recently. Um, it's at the Alamo Draft House. They're going through the Harry Potter movies, and so I was kind of thinking about trying to catch the first one, and then I was unable to. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna watch the first one on Max, and then I'll catch the second one. And then I sat down in my chair and I opened up Max, and there was no Harry Potter. They had
Oh,
immigrated to Peacock.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, that's not happening anytime soon. I had actually thought almost about like getting like a Blu-ray collection of like the Harry Potter movies, but I'm like, why would I do that? It's on Max. I have access to Max. Well, I
Well,
don't have
it's
access to the
it's
Harry Potter movies.
it's back on Max right now, so
Too late. Too late. They missed their chance. Here's the
yeah.
thing. I know I'll watch these one day because there's a very strong chance that whatever girl I might marry one day, if I ever marry in the future, there's a very strong chance that she probably grew up with Harry Potter and is gonna sit me down and make me watch them, which I will do. But I think kind of having the initiative of like, oh, if it's playing at the theater to like the ones I missed and I could watch at home on Max kind of thing. And so it just the timing was right and now it's not. And so my priorities have shifted. I do intend to try to watch Harry Potter one day, but it's just not a high priority for me right now. Um, and in a general sense, like I've kind of been enjoying my like more one-off movies. And again, that's nothing against a series of movies or Harry Potter specifically, but yeah, yeah, that's kind of just been the vibe. I think Harry Potter would be a lot of fun to go through with a future significant other. And if I watch them beforehand, then awesome. That I'm not against that, but I also feel like Harry Potter kind of just being one of those things that I feel like most every girl or boy grew up with, then there's a high chance I might be invited to something to watch through them one day. And again, like I mentioned with Shrek, it also could depend on the environment. If the environment is too casual, then it might be too casual for me to want to watch with them. But if the environment is serious enough to more or less introduce them to me, or if I make the time to do so, then I definitely intend to. Because at the end of the day, I would, in theory, like to watch every movie. In theory, I would like to watch every movie, and so Harry Potter's definitely something I. I'm not one of those people like I don't want to watch Harry Potter for whatever reason. I have no reason. Bring it on one day, but today's not that day.
Yeah, I have a mixed history with Harry Potter. I grew up reading the books and watching the movies, and so I have a lot of nostalgia and fondness for it. And the world and the characters, especially the world. I mean, Hogwarts. Who didn't want to go to Hogwarts as a kid? Just like you get your letter, and then you go off to this magical school where everything is all right in the world. Um, in the last few years, the author has said and done some very unsavory things that makes me very reticent to support the series. But I still have that love for the world and the characters and even the movies. I'm glad I own the movies so I don't have to feel bad buying them and supporting the author who, yeah, she's just, she has gone off the deep end in the most unfortunate way, in terms of bigotry and hatred and things that are antithetical to what this series stands for. Um, so yeah, I, I haven't revisited this in the last few years, so I don't know how if I'll be able to like separate that from J.K. Rowling as a person and who she has become. Um, but yeah, I still have a lot of fondness for this movie and for this series. So yeah, I don't I don't know what else there is to say.
Yeah. So before we move on to our number ones, why don't we get into our honorable mentions?
Yeah, I have quite a few here, as is often the case. One that almost made my list, and I actually made up a slide for it and then cut it at the last second just because I'm not sure how much I want to talk about this versus just let people experience it for themselves. But John Cameron Mitchell's Hedwig and the Angry Inch. This is about a gender bending punk rock star and her personal journey and great musical numbers, like phenomenal punk rock songs. The aesthetic and the vibes are just on point for this. Um, John Cameron Mitchell stars as Hedwig and phenomenal performance. This is just like a masterpiece of queer cinema, and there are elements in it that haven't aged the most gracefully, but the feelings of it and the exploration of identity and of self just really resonate, across time in a way that I was not expecting when I went into it, but I loved sitting down to watch it. Um, Also, I have David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. I have not seen this in several years, and when I watched it, it was on an airplane, which is not the ideal environment for watching it. But I remember being just very enthralled by its weird world. Um, so yeah, I've been meaning to rewatch it, and we'll probably get around to that at some point. I just didn't have time before this. One that I did watch for the first time actually a couple nights ago is Y Tu Mama Tambien, the Alfonso Cuarón film. It's a road trip movie that doesn't have a lot of plot, but manages to never feel like it's meandering, which I really appreciate it. And it's just like a fascinating character study that also involves a lot of like Mexican history and politics in a way that I was not expecting, and I actually learned some stuff there. Then Wes Anderson's The Royal Tenenbaums, one of my favorites of his. I haven't seen it in several years, so I don't know how it compares to his more recent stuff, but I loved it as a teenager. I also loved Donnie Darko as a teenager, and it's a weird movie. It's maybe a little bit overrated in certain places and also underrated in certain other crowds. I think it's just fun. Then one that I watched, speaking of Alan Cumming playing a villain, we have Josie and the Pussycats. This felt like a proto Scott Pilgrim versus the World. It has a lot of that aesthetic and that vibe, and I really enjoyed it. Alan Cumming is great at it. He's great at everything. Um, One that probably would have made my list is The Others. Um, this is a film starring Naomi Watts. It's a haunted house movie, and I'm not going to say anything more because this would have been on my top 5, except I had the twist spoiled for me, and knowing it going in kind of brought down my experience of watching it. So if you have not seen it, watch it before hearing anything else about it. Um, yeah, just beautiful film and very well performed. I just wasn't able to get into it knowing too much about it going in. And then I feel like I just want to mention The Princess Diaries. We were
Yeah.
talking about Legally Blonde and Mean Girls, and this kind of slots into that and more of the Disney PG version of those things. But Anne Hathaway is so much fun. Julie Andrews is so much fun. It's a great little movie. Not as like totemic as some of the stuff we've talked about, but
Yep.
Yeah, haven't seen any of those. Definitely a few of them have heard of and wanted to get to, and now I've learned a few more. Um, my honorable mentions. Um, really just one to kind of mention. I watched it right before uh jumping on here. Um, is a movie called Kate and Leopold. Um, it's directed by James Mangold. I've seen a few James Mangold movies, and I think obviously the one that kind of is I'm most familiar with is Logan, but I have also seen Ford versus Ferrari and The Wolverine and Girl Interrupted. I recently watched Girl Interrupted. Enjoyed that one. Um, so yeah, I don't know. James Mangold strikes me as an interesting director, and his upcoming Star Wars and DC movies are honestly my most anticipated movies within those universes. Actually, correction, I'm also really excited for the Supergirl movie. Um, but still, also like Star Wars. I'm not necessarily a huge Star Wars fan, but I am so excited about that Star Wars movie. Um, I think after seeing what he's done with like Logan and Ford versus Ferrari, I think makes me very intrigued, especially in that Star Wars movie. It's like Logan just strikes me as like a modern Western, and I'm just curious like what his flair would be for that Star Wars movie. Anyways, all that yapping. Sorry, I apologize. So I'm like, yeah, Kate and Leopold. Since it's James Mangold, why not? And I know that James Mangold kind of has a mixed filmography. When you think about like, oh my God, Logan and Ford vs Ferrari, and then you turn around, and you're like, oh, Wolverine, Kate and Leopold, and the new Indiana Jones. I feel like is how some people feel. But I still just wanted to watch it just because I'm like James Mangold, and yeah, doesn't necessarily. I wouldn't have known watching it was James Mangold or anything like that. But I just wanted to watch it. Also, who does it star? Hugh Jackman, which I find pretty crazy because then later the two would work together on two Wolverine movies. That's kind of crazy and cool to think about. Also, who does it star? Levi Scribner. Who would he later become? Wolverine's brother in Origins. So I don't know. Those ties are kind of cool. The movie's fine. I will say, as predictable as it is, ending just made me smile a lot. Um, yeah. Again, not necessarily attaching a bunch of fireworks to this, but it's enjoyable for what it is. So, yeah. There's one other movie I've seen, but someone else will mention it later, or maybe some other people will mention it later. We'll see. I don't know.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. But
We'll
moving
see.
on to my honorable mentions, the first one that almost made my list is the film AI, or Artificial Intelligence. What a trigger word for what we have going on in today's environment. But back then, this was a lesser seen thing trying to explore this concept. It was it was going to be Kubrick's film that he would collaborate with Steven Spielberg, but he passed away before they really finished anything. So Spielberg took the project and finished it. It is full of a lot of heart, a lot of really good visual effects, plus some really bad visual effects. Um, I like a lot of the motions. I like a lot of the themes. Um, but this film is kind of not as well known as you'd think it should be. And part of that is because of the weird direction the story takes in the third act, where I'm not going to spoil the ending, but there's this huge twist, and it kind of ruins the film, and it's almost pointless. But I'm not sure why they went in that direction, but they went that direction, and it is out there. It is the most out there part of this film. It's like a kick in the teeth. You had no idea this was a thing, but it is a thing, and I didn't love it, but I liked most of the other parts of the film. So there's that.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here because I actually watched this specifically for this podcast, and yeah, similar experience to you. The ending completely threw me. There is something, the what is happening is not communicated as well as it should in terms of who certain characters are. Um, in a way that, like, I was reading reviews afterwards and went, "Oh, that actually makes so much more sense than how I was interpreting it." Um, but yeah, everything before that point, Haley Joel Osment, phenomenal actor and like perfect for this role. Jude Law, phenomenal, great visual effects. Yeah, it's fascinating, and especially as like part of Steven Spielberg's career, and as you said, a less discussed version or like work of his.
Yeah, I, I'm very curious about what the Kubrick version would have looked like. Um,
Yeah,
Apparently,
which
Kubrick was like wanting it to be more family friendly, and Spielberg was wanting
yeah,
it to be more darker. So it was an interesting back and forth that they're going against type. But uh, moving on to Jurassic Park 3, the Jurassic Park film that kind of ended the series until they got brought back with Jurassic World. This is one I saw a whole lot as a kid, partially because it was just on TV all the time for some reason. It's like I'd watch it one day, I go visit someone's house the next day, and hey, they're watching the film. And I always show up to see the film at the exact same moment. It's like, oh, why do I keep showing up at this exact same moment? I don't know. But it's a film that I like certain ideas that they were going to do that they just don't do anything with. Um, it's smaller scale. Yeah. I like some of the effects. Yeah. There's some really weird choices, like the nap scene on the airplane. Um,
Alan.
Alan.
That's the only thing
Yeah.
I know from this movie.
They make some weird choices with like the character direction that I don't love, but it is a film. It is watchable. I don't hate it. As
Put
opposed
that
to
on the box. It is a film. It is watchable.
yep, yep. So, there you go. Then I have The Mummy Returns, which is, I guess, notorious for having the the terrible CGI Rock as a giant scorpion man. Um, the story is a sequel. It's fun. It's a fun little globe-trotting adventure, but um, I think I prefer the first one overall. And then there's the infamous Tim Burton Planet of the Apes film, which has honestly the best ape makeup out of all the franchise. But the story is hot garbage, but in not in like a stinky way that's like bad stinky. It's just so
It's boring.
it's boring. It's drawn out. They just stepped on the poop and dragged it on the carpet. It's just not entertaining to watch at all. Then the plot twist at the end just makes no sense. They were trying to do some
Th-
weird stuff.
Did you have the DVD of this?
I did, yes.
Did it have the pamphlet explaining the ending?
No, I didn't keep that.
The ending was so confusing that they put a pamphlet in the DVD case that explains how the ending works.
Yeah. So they saw like the original Planet of the Apes film and that little kind of twist ending. They're like, oh, let's do the same thing without actually thinking it through. And it happened. It's like, oh, well, I'm confused. And that's the end of the film. And there's no sequel after this. So what a shame. Um, and
I
then
wouldn't say it's a shame there's no sequel.
it's a shame that it sucked.
Yes.
That's the shame. And then my last honorable mention is Rush Hour 2, part of a very offensive series of films. I guess that's the best way to describe it, but like a fun offensive if you're part of that group of people. I don't know how else to describe it, but I watched this for Jackie Chan and his action. That's great, but the best part of this film is the bloopers in the end of the credits. So there you go. There you go. All right. Now we can move on to our number ones.
Yeah, my number
And he
one.
sounded very excited.
Yeah, my number one is, as I alluded to before, this is my favorite movie of all time. It shares that spot with two other movies, which will make more sense as we go through these and I talk about them. But this is Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This is, to me, like cinema. Like the definition of cinema to me is The Lord of the Rings. When I was growing up, my parents were huge Lord of the Rings fans, still are. They had like books about the making of that I would like flip through as a kid and imagine, what is this movie? And then when I was in like third grade, my dad read the book to me. And then once I was done with the book, I was allowed to watch the movie. And I mean, it just blew my mind as like a little 8-year old or something, however old I was. Um, and yeah, it's like everything that I love about cinema starts here. It is my favorite movie because it is to me the epitome of everything that a movie can be for me. Um, the emotions, the design, the visual effects, the performances, it's all just so dear to me. And yeah, I rewatch this at least once a year. I recently just saw it in theaters for the first time, and that was such a wonderful experience. Yeah, it's my favorite movie because it is the movie to me.
I shall elaborate later.
um, I might as well just elaborate on that now. I saw the Lord of the Rings movies, 2 years ago.
A year or two ago, yeah.
And yeah, so I enjoyed them for what they are. I will admit I probably would have put it somewhere on my ranking list, but it's just so special to to Jay and John. So I'm like, I'll
Yeah.
let you have your spotlight moment at number one with that. Anyways, I respect them a lot, but I do recognize two things. Number one, I watched them when again I wasn't so mentally like, oh my gosh, movies kind of mentality. Also, number two, um, they just deserve a rewatch. I watch the standard versions because I just wanted to do that, and so
That's the
probably
best place to start. Yeah.
yeah. So one day in the future, whether it's my next watch or a watch in the future, I will definitely hit the extended cuts. But I definitely do respect Lord of the Rings quite a bit. Um, I also wore in my mind which one I like the most. So since I'm not going to be here next week, because these released like a year out from each other,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So in theory, I feel like I like the second one. Oh yeah, I'm not going to be here for the next episode. Um, I'm busy with work. In theory, I feel like I like the second one more because there's an aspect of you see the relationships grow and strengthen and bond more, and so it's more enjoyable to see that to a degree than like people kind of like first bumping into each other and they're a little more coarse with each other and then and in the third one there's just a lot of action and it it just wasn't as gripping for me. So then I feel like in my mind I'm like, oh my god, the second one, that's my favorite one. And then I remember the trees. I remember the trees. I don't necessarily hate the trees. I just hate the fact that they take so much time.
And that's just a theatrical
Yeah.
cut.
Ah! So yeah, so that's my dilemma. I don't know how to rank them. Anyways, but I respect them at the end of the day. And I hope I can respect them more as time goes on. My number one is Ocean's 11. And on my letterbox favorite four, I recently declared this as to be in the third placement. The first one is 20. The first one is Wally. Second one is 20th Century Girl. Fourth one is The Housemaid, the one from 1960. Um, I like gone back and forth between like Ocean's 11 and Black Swan. I love Black Swan, but kind of like on second rewatch, Ocean's 11 hit spot more than Black Swan. So I kind of let Ocean's 11 take the Black Swan spot. So I was my older roommate. Um, he was putting on like a heist movie night, and the first movie was the 2000s Italian Job, which was fine. I don't hate it. It is what it is, kind of thing. No, I mean that positively, but it wasn't so much that like I was like, oh my gosh. There were definitely fun moments in it though. And then he plays Ocean's 11, and I'm not gonna lie, first 20 minutes, I don't love the first 20 minutes that much. It's just when they're introducing the characters, and it just I feel indifferent about it honestly, both first watch and second watch. But as soon as they step in the room and they start outlining their plan and they start executing it, I am the definition of locked in. They got me. I am so in it. Oh my gosh. It captures my attention for the rest of the movie. I'm soaked in and they do such a good job of just like revealing the story. Because if they went ahead and outlined the whole thing in that scene and then you watched its execution, that's a boring movie. But this movie gives you enough information to ride with. And then as you go on, you find out more information and more details, and it makes that experience so exciting and just locked in. Yeah, usually in watching a movie, I want there to be like some semblance of a good story or good characters kind of thing. And I don't necessarily think Ocean's 11 necessarily thrives in that degree. Ocean's 11 thrives on its experience of the heist, the plan, and so I feel like in theory, yeah, I don't really care about a heist. It's not necessarily something that's necessarily going to capture my attention. And that's one of the cool things that a movie can be. Maybe it's something that you don't care about, but if it's done well and if it appeals to you just right, then you're locked in and you care about it during those 2 hours. And for me, I feel like that's what makes Ocean's 11 a great movie. It makes me care about something I usually don't feel like I care about. It's a kind of movie that accomplishes things I usually don't think about or care about as much. Again, like I said, I'm usually more of like, give me a good story, give me good characters. And Ocean's 11, while there are enjoyable characters and there's definitely some story elements in terms of the characters, that's not necessarily its primary focus. The primary focus is showing you the heist, the planning, and the execution, and the reveals that come alongside it as you progress with it. And I think it's a masterpiece in that opinion. I definitely know that not everyone agrees with me. I know some people who watched it who don't necessarily feel the same way I do, but I feel like it's an incredibly experiential movie, um, more than a bunch of other movies that I've seen. Um, yeah, I know movies inherently are experiential, but not all of them click for me. Kind of like what I talked about, like Spirited Away. It doesn't click with me yet. Hopefully, it will one day. I want to absolutely love it. I want to absolutely love every movie in theory. Um, but Ocean's 11, it clicked with me from the first viewing, and I felt the exact same way the second time I watched it. And yeah, Ocean's 11 is one of my favorite movies of all time.
John, you've seen this one, right?
I have seen this one. I think it is probably one of the best remakes out there because this is a remake of the '60s film, which has, I think, Sinatra.
Yeah, Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, just a member of the Rat Pack. Um, and so it is slow. It is not as exciting, and the ending is just so underwhelming. This remake, it is fast paced, but really good fast pace. It is fun, and I like heists that have a fun element to it. So it's fun. It's great. They have a little twist of the plan that they didn't tell us in the beginning. So when it happened, it was like, ah ha ha, that's pretty good. And so this, I enjoyed this one. Yes, because I knew that Christopher would have it on this list. I didn't include it on mine. I think so.
Yeah,
I
I'm in a
really I really wanted to talk about Spy Kids, I guess.
yeah, I'm in a similar place where this is probably in my top five, but I didn't put it here just because I knew Christopher had it at his number one spot. But yeah, this is I love heist movies. It's one of my favorite genres. This is the heist movie.
Yeah.
What Steven Soderbergh is able to do, and this is kind of phenomenal for him that the year prior, he made two films. He was nominated for Best Director twice, the only person to ever do that. He won Best Director, and that's not even the best thing he did in those 2 years because he made Ocean's 11 and was phenomenal, a massive hit, and one that has just stood the test of time as, yeah, again, it's the heist movie. If you want to watch a good heist movie, you're watching Ocean's 11. There's no other movie that fills that to quite the same extent. I love Ocean's 8. I love a lot of other heist movies. Ocean's 11 just hits every single mark perfectly. Um, yeah, it's phenomenal. I love it so much. I need to rewatch it. I rewatched it a few years ago and it just hit the spot and I need to rewatch it again. This is what I could imagine rewatching every year and still loving every time.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to my number one. We've talked about it before, but we're going to mention it again because I love it. So, my number one is, of course, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. I think this film is my favorite of the trilogy. I just like the simple build up to what it is. Uh, we get our introductions to the characters, we get a fun exploration. Uh, this is the one where all of our characters are together, whereas the sequels they're split apart and we're yearning for them to come back together. But this is where we're all together. It's fun. It's cool. Jake, you have said everything about this film that I would say. I love it in terms of cinema. It's one that the older I get, this is the one that has stood the test of time for me. Because there's so many other films that I loved as a kid, even Star Wars, that I think that this one, the older I get, I'm like, yep, I like the themes explored here. I like how all three films are done together. I love the visuals. I love the storytelling. I love the music. I love everything about it. It's just, to me, this is the best trilogy, almost a perfect trilogy that came out of the 2000s. So I love it. I'm never going to stop loving it. I'm always down. I'm always down to watch these films.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, you and me, we had this whole thing where we spent an entire day watching through the entire extended trilogy cuts. That was
Yep,
like a 12.
we did the marathon. We did it
We
with
did,
friends. It was a whole party.
yeah, it was a whole party. It was a tiresome day. We made up crap along the way. We created a subplot where there's this romance between Aragorn and his horse. And somehow throughout the film, by the third film, the horse ended up on the boat or something. I don't know the specifics, but that's what happens when you watch a film, watch 12-hour film, I guess. So yeah, and now I guess let's foul the mood with our least favorite films of the year.
Yeah. Um Mine, I have not seen this in many years. You could tell me that this is a great movie and I'd be like, "Okay, sure. I don't know if I believe you, but whatever." This is Cats and Dogs, the movie about cats and there are dogs and they're secret agents and the cats are trying to destroy the world somehow and the dogs are trying to stop them, and it's the same thing as every kid's spy movie from what I remember. Again, I haven't seen this in years and I have no desire to revisit it. Um,
I I loved this film as a kid. I watched
I
it
did
so
too.
many times. I haven't watched it in a whole well, I haven't watched it in a long time, and I kind of want to. I don't. I guess I
Yeah,
put it off because I don't want to ruin my expectation of how fun it was. I hated the sequel, Katie Galore, when it came out, but
yeah.
this one was fun. I loved it.
If you told me that this is the best of its genre of like this specific kind of kids spy movies, usually involving animals, I would believe you because the competition is like G Force and Barbie Spy Squad.
Yeah.
I do not think fondly of this looking back. I do remember the DVD. You had to like select if you were going to be on the cat side or the dog side, and it would
Yes.
be like a different menu
Yes.
design depending on that. Um, but yeah, that's I I don't think this is a good movie. Maybe it is. Maybe I would rewatch it and love it. I don't
We
think
have to
that's going
rewatch
to
this
be
one.
the
We
case.
have to rewatch this one.
Oh no. Isn't
Honestly,
there a
it
third
seems
one as
incredible.
well?
Uh, I think there is. I stopped paying attention after the second one, unfortunately. Actually,
Yeah, I just
fortunately, I've stopped paying attention after the second one.
did a quick look, and yeah, there are three.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the third one released in 2020. Oh
Oh,
no.
oh,
Oh, oh,
okay.
oh.
That's
Okay.
yeah.
The
Okay.
second one was 2010. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So in 5 years we're getting another one, guys.
Cats and Dogs 4.
Cats and Dogs 4
Look forward to it, I guess.
forever.
Cats and dogs forever.
Man. Okay. Um, I would like to preface that this is my least favorite. If I have to rank these, this so happens to be at the bottom. This is in no way me saying I hate this movie. I don't. It just so happens to be at the bottom. Atlantis. I already spoke my piece. Again, like I'm not fully bought into like the Disney style in terms of presentation of story. But again, I absolutely love Atlantis itself. So yeah,
And going on to my least favorite of the year, it is a Disney straight to DVD, straight to video film called Lady and the Tramp 2: Scamp's Adventure. This film, it's not a good film. Some people love it. I don't like this one. The problem is that the antagonist, I hate the antagonist. He is so unlikable. For a film called Lady and the Tramp, the lady is in this for like 2 seconds. So it's just a tramp, and it's this annoying kid character, like rebelling against his dad. And there's also this really weird romance, but the protagonist is a puppy, and the other character is not. So it's it's weird. And also because this is a straight to DVD video, animation quality not up to par, music quality not up to par. Half the characters in this film are voiced by the same person who is really talented. He has the amazing vocals, but for me, who is trained to catch his voice, it's like okay, Jeff, you have a I hope you've been getting a strong paycheck for this one because you're the entire film so far. So yes, that is Lady and the Tramp 2.
I just
Have you?
love the fact that like every single least favorite movie that we're gonna do is going to be a Disney directed sequel, or direct to video sequel because you went through all of those.
I did. Yes.
And they are bad. Like, we didn't talk about Atlantis too. We may talk about that in the future if it's
I,
on your worst, John.
I mean,
But
Atlantis 2 has. It's not a film. That's its problem.
yeah,
It is 3 episodes of a TV show that never got made, and probably should have been made because it could have been fun, but no.
yeah, yeah. I like the concept. We'll talk about that one in the future,
If
maybe.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see where I put it. If I put it somewhere. Well, I guess that's all we have. Is there any other thoughts and opinions you want to give about the year 2001 Space Odyssey?
Yeah, I mean, fascinating year just in terms of the origin point for so many of the things that are going to dominate Hollywood for the next few years. And I think you can tie stuff into even historical events, this sort of desire for escapism and for fantasy that then kind of leads into the superhero boom later in the decade. Obviously,
Well,
we aren't seeing specifically superheroes in this year, but we are seeing the fantasy and the
yeah. Well,
good
next
versus
year,
evil narratives.
we restart the superhero
Yes,
boom.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the big one. So, in that case,
Yeah. Could I interrupt for a
you
moment?
may interrupt.
So, so since I'm not going to be here for the next episode, um, I just want to share one little story um, as early as 2002. Our family did intend to see Ice Age in theaters, and
Oh,
we went to see it. And then my dad didn't really like it, so 10 minutes later, he walked out with me out of the theater. And then 10 minutes after that, my mom and grandma walked out as well. Fast forward later that year, Jonah VeggieTales movie hits theaters, and so we go to the theater. And I guess my dad put me down, and soon as I was out of his grasp, I ran the other way. I guess I also didn't like Ice Age as a little kid and was afraid I was going to see Ice Age again for the second time. So we did not end up seeing Jonah VeggieTales movie in theaters. Yeah. So that's your little tease of next episode next year that I will not be here and that I will unfortunately not be able to tell that story, but just figured I just tacked that on here. So hope you guys have a great time for that one.
Yeah. What a story, Mark.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.